Let's do this bad boy. Tri-City Sports Now, I'm Marky Bilson, and I'm making a new friend, hopefully, with Rick Gosselin, who is a longtime columnist for the Dallas Morning News. He has covered the Dallas Cowboys for 29 years, told me he just missed Landry. The days of the Dallas Cowboys being broadcast on WXIS that I can recall, he just missed those days and such. But he has been, ever since, the second year of Jerry Jones covering the Cowboys. He also makes the presentations of Dallas Cowboys football players to the room that votes on them for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And now, how long have you been doing that, Rick Gosselin, making the presentation for the Cowboys?
I've been on the committee for over 2 decades, 24 years now.
But a guy like, now correct me if I'm wrong though, but a guy like Rayfield Wright, that was done by more of a veterans committee. That argument would have been, you would have been doing more contemporary Cowboys to argue for their enshrinement. Am I correct there?
Since I'm on the veterans committee, I made the Rayfield Wright presentation. I made the Jerry Kramer presentation. I made Mick Tangohan, Gene Hickman. I made a lot of presentations.
Wow. I wanted to talk to you about Jason Witten, but I will ask you this before I go on. If you made the presentation for Jerry Kramer, and Kramer was kind of that Gil Hodges-like fella, that guy, why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? Seemed to have, the biggest argument of all the guys who weren't in, should be in from the old days. Who do you think is the new Jerry Kramer? If I can ask you that, would it be Jim Marshall, or is there another player out there that you think maybe is that, shall we say, that person on the cusp in the Veterans Committee that a lot of people have talked about to make the Hall of Fame?
I think the best player, I long thought the best player not in Canton was Jerry Kramer. And now the best player not in Canton is Johnny Robinson, who was safety for the Chiefs in the 60s. Mm-hmm. He's the only member of the 1960s first-team All-Decade team not in. And I think he should be the guy that's next up in the queue.
Wow, that's quite the argument right there. And now, was he a Dallas Texan as well as a Kansas City Chief?
He was a Dallas Texan.
Okay.
He signed with Texas in 1960 and played through 1970. He had a 10-interception season to lead the AFL in 66, and he had a 10-interception season to lead the NFL in 1970.
Okay, so
I think he got caught up. There was when the two leagues merged, there were 14 NFL voters and 8 AFL voters. And I think a lot of AFL guys paid the price of not having enough support from NFL voters, and I think Robinson was one of them.
Interesting. Johnny Robinson, the only guy in the state. That was a guy, like I said, I was kind of thinking that Jim Marshall might be that player, but I'm glad. Thanks for the insight there. Now, I want to ask you, Rick Gosselin, assuming you're still doing this in 5 years, but that will be the time when Jason Witten from right next door in Elizabethton, Tennessee, will come up, and you'll be making the argument for him to make Canton, Ohio, have a bus there. So let me ask you, I know it's a little bit in the future, but when I ask you what arguments will you make for Witten, what arguments will you make for Witten to be enshrined in Canton?
Well, I think it's all about the quantity. He set the single season record with 110 catches in 2012. He got that record. He had 4,000-yard seasons, which is as many as Gonzalez had. He's 4th all-time in catches, 21st in yardage. He's got a lot of statistical strength in his candidacy, but there are a couple holes. Won 67% of everybody enshrined in Canton won a championship. So Jason never even got to the conference title game. 66% of all the players in Canton made all-decade teams. Jason did not make the 2000s all-decade team.
Ooh.
And with him retiring with 2 years left, there's a good chance he won't make this all-decade team either.
Yeah.
And the other issue is the touchdowns. He only had 68 touchdowns in his career. Antonio Gates, who played the same window, 2016-2017, caught
No, that's
So by no means is Witten a slam dunk, although I do think at some point he will be tried.
that's quite telling. That's actually probably the best argument that I've heard against Witten was the how he would be in the 1/3 of the players that didn't play for a championship, either conference or league, and the lack of touchdowns. I noticed that myself. I don't think he ever had a 10 touchdown season. And I remember going through, comparing tight ends of then and now, and was very impressed. Like Mike Ditka, his rookie year, caught 12 touchdown passes. And I was very impressed with that because at that time you didn't throw a lot to the tight end. And, Witten, in an era when you had the 5-yard bump and run and basically what's over the middle that wasn't there in previous eras is now there. He didn't have a 12 touchdown season. So I do appreciate that argument you're making. But in covering him, I mean, you've been in the locker room and all that. When I mention Jason Witten, what comes to mind? What kind of a locker room presence was Jason Witten for the Cowboys?
He was the best. He was the class act. He was the guy that, win or lose, always talked. He never ran on hiding. He became basically the club spokesman. After games, everybody talked to Witten because you knew he'd talk and you knew he'd give you some good insight. And he was the guy that held many of his teammates accountable. And off the field, he was an NFL Man of the Year. Off the field, in the locker room, he's a first ballot candidate. But on the field, you understand this. This committee doesn't enshrine tight ends.
Mm-hmm.
They've only put 8 tight ends in Canton. And the shortest wait for any tight end was 3 years. And that was both Kellen Winslow and Shannon Sharp. John Mackey, who was picked as the best tight end in the NFL's first 50 years, and a guy I think is the best tight end of all time, he waited 15 years to get in. He was just raving about Ditka's stats. He waited 12 years to get in. For whatever reason, this committee doesn't pay homage to the tight end position. And the other issue, there's a lot of talk here about him being, Jason being a first ballot candidate. The other issue is look at the class.
Sure.
5 years, the way it stands now, Dwight Freeney's up, Joe Thomas is up, Antonio Gates is up, and Jason Witten is up. And you have 4 first ballot players, including 2 tight ends. And Joe Thomas played 10 years, went to 10 Pro Bowls. Dwight Freeney's got 126 sacks. This committee loves sacks. Gates has got the touchdowns, almost twice as many touchdowns as Witten. I do think Jason Witten will be in the Hall of Fame. I think his numbers will get him there, but it may take him a couple years.
Okay, interesting. And I have talked to people that say, first ballot Hall of Famer in Canton, perhaps not the same prestige or quite as important as first ballot Hall of Famer in Cooperstown. Now, I'm not sure of your baseball expertise there, Rick Gosselin, but would you agree?
Yeah, I vote on the Baseball Writers Association Hall of Fame too, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I think I'm more along the line of baseball thinking. I think there is a separation between a first ballot Hall of Famer and a Hall of Famer. I think Jim Brown was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Curtis Martin was a Hall of Famer. Johnny Unitas was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Bob Greasy was a Hall of Famer. I think the first ballot should be reserved for the best player at his position in the history of the game. Not just the best player on the ballot that year, but the best player in history. Being on the senior committee, I presented a lot of these seniors. Jack Butler was an all-decade cornerback in the 50s. He waited 50 years to get in. Jerry Crane was picked as the greatest guard in the first 50 years of the NFL history. He waited 45 years to get in. For someone to wait 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, there's no problem with that. Many great players have waited a lot longer.
We're talking to Rick Gosselin. He's columnist for the Dallas Morning News. I just learned, idiot me, that he also votes for Cooperstown as well as Canton. But assuming that he's still, voting in 5 years, he will be making the presentation for Jason Witten to make the Hall of Fame. Now, I wanted to, we mentioned Canton versus versus Cooperstown. Wanted to change a little bit. You've covered the Cowboys for a long time. Gerald Sensabaugh has been on the news here locally for a variety of reasons, one of which is that he's running for mayor of Sullivan County, which is the county that Kingsport and Bristol, Tennessee are in. I just want to ask you, going back, what are some memories of covering Gerald Sensabaugh?
Not many. He wasn't a Pro Bowl player here. Good player, but he wasn't. He didn't jump out at you. I don't really have that many memories of Sensabaugh.
Okay, interesting right there. You were mentioning that Witten was the spokesman of the team. I know Sensabaugh came into light today because I know when he was coaching high school football at a local high school, David Crockett High, which is a very Tennessee name, Rick Gosselin, he had made an accusation that funds for the football program from the boosters were being misappropriated, and he was proven correct by an investigation just the other day. So I wanted to mention that to anyone who tuned in late here. Rick Gosselin, as we look here now, I want to ask you, moving ahead, we've carried the Cowboys games on this station in the past. It seems to me the Cowboys are losing a lot of key players. They're down their two best receivers. They also, Terrence Williams arrested this past weekend. When you look ahead and in a tough division that has improving teams, not only, as Philly, the Super Bowl champ, but New York has improved, Washington with Alex Smith. How do you think the Cowboys stand up in 2018?
The best team in football is in their division. That's the Eagles.
Yeah.
And the Eagles are better on paper now than they were when they beat the Patriots that day. They're getting Carson Wentz back. Had he played 16 games, he may have been the MVP of the league. They're getting their middle linebacker back, Jordan Hicks. They traded for Michael Bennett, a Pro Bowl pass rusher. They get their left tackle, Pro Bowler Jason Peters back. He missed the playoffs with an injury. And they got the best tight end in the draft in Dallas Goedert. On paper, the Eagles are better than the 13-3 team they were a year ago. The Giants are improved. The Redskins are improved. The Cowboys, in addition to those guys, they lost their middle linebacker, Anthony Hitchens, who went to Kansas City. So this team is going to have to rely more and more on the running game. They think they have what could be the best line in football. They got 3 first-round draft picks under long-term contracts on the blocking front. They got a guy who 2 years ago, when he was there for all 16 games, won a rushing title. And I think that's the reason that they were able to win with Dak Prescott, because Elliott was the featured performer. They're going to have to run the ball. They're going to have to control the ball, protect the defense, and the passing game could be a challenge without Dez Bryant, without Jason Witten. The 2 safety blankets for Prescott are gone. It's going to be a long road for the Cowboys to get back to Super Bowl contention with the Eagles sitting there and having lost those pieces up in 2017.
Well, you mentioned Dez Bryant. Where do you think he ends up?
Well, I thought he misplayed his hand. I thought he had to get signed before the draft, before teams could fill their needs with wide receivers coming out of the draft. He didn't do it. Now, he turned down a 3-year deal for Baltimore. He wanted a 1-year deal, and they're not knocking on his door right now. And he may have to wait until somebody gets hurt in training camp before he signs. And it's a shame because he's 29 years old. And I think there's still some gas left in the tank, and I think he should have signed with Baltimore, but he didn't. And now he's on the outside looking in. Maybe long before he gets back in.
We're talking to Rick Gosselin. He is a columnist for the Dallas Morning News. He's going to be the guy that in 5 years will be presenting the argument for Jason Witten to make the Hall of Fame. What kind of a color commentator do you think Jason Witten will be on Monday Night Football?
Jason Witten will not fail. That's his history. He's been a guy that's worked and worked and worked and made himself a Pro Bowl player, made himself a Hall of Fame candidate. He will not fail. He will not be Tony Romo. He's not going to be as excitable, and he's not going to be calling out the plays. He'll be more like maybe Daryl Johnson, if you watch Daryl Johnson.
Sure.
More analytical. He certainly knows the X and O's of the game. He knows offense back and forth. He knows defensive coverages back and forth. I think he'll be very good, but I don't think he'll be the instant success that Romo was. do I think he'll be as excitable as Rumble was, but I think he'll be very analytical, much like Daryl Johnson.
Well, let me ask you, you said Jason Witten will not fail, that when he puts his mind to something, it works, damn it. My question to you, Rick Gosselin, I remember doing a feature article on Jason Witten for the Johnstown Tribune Democrat, okay? 15 years ago, featuring him, because I thought maybe the Steelers might draft him. They wound up with Troy Polamalu. I don't think they're really complaining and all this. But, I had the East Tennessee ties. Okay, here's a player you ought to look at. I remember interviewing him, the interview set up from the agent, and I remember getting off the phone and saying, my goodness, that guy is not articulate at all. And it was the first time I had talked to him, and I don't know if he would just come from a workout or what the circumstances. I remember we had a chat, but he didn't come off real well. And I wondered often if that's what actually dropped him down to the third round of the draft when a lot of people were projecting him for late first round. Anyway, here's my question. Over the years, did you find Witten to become more articulate? You mentioned team spokesman, but a man who, yes, became more comfortable and more articulate as time went by.
Oh, without question. I mean, there was thought to his answers. There was tremendous insight to his answers. He listened to the question and he answered the question. It wasn't just a script of cliches he was throwing out there. You gave a good question, he gives you a good answer. No, he really, he's been in the league, 15 years? Mm-hmm. He really polished it up. He learned from some good ones, the Marcus Squares and people like that. And I think he really polished up his act. I think at the end, that's why TV wants him. He is such a good speaker. And he does have thought behind his answers. And again, that's why he's not going to fail.
That is a strong endorsement from a guy who is known to be pretty objective. It's Rick Gosselin, Dallas Morning News. He'll be making the presentation for Jason Witten, and he might be making a presentation for Johnny Robinson, the old safety from the Chiefs, who I loved your talk there. The only player, the only defensive back, first teamer, all 60s team, not in Canton, Ohio. Very interesting. Is Johnny Robinson the new Jerry Kramer? Hey, I really enjoyed this, and hope we can stay in touch a little bit, Rick Gosselin. Thanks a lot I love your direct answers that you've been giving me. I'm Marky Bilson. We'll be looking here a little bit on where the Vols are projected to finish this college football season when I return on Tri-City Sports Now. And I'll also tell you this.